stepsister demanded I give it to her, but I left her begging. Story time. At Thanksgiving, my sister found out I had $12 million, and my family instantly demanded I hand it over, claiming she deserved it more, using a throwaway account for obvious reasons, with certain details changed to maintain anonymity. So, I'm Sarah, 38F, and I need to get something off my chest. You know those family dynamics where one child can do no wrong while the other is practically invisible? Yeah, welcome to my life. Everything was pretty normal until I turned 8. Back then, I was an only child. My parents weren't overly affectionate, but they were present. Mom helped me with my homework, and Dad would sometimes take me fishing at St. Leclerc's Lake. We weren't exactly the Brady Bunch, but we were fine. Then came the night that changed everything. I remember waking up to my Aunt Kelly at 2 a.m. telling me to pack a bag because Mom was in the hospital. My little sister, Rachel, was on her way, but something was wrong. She wasn't supposed to be born for another 2 months. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of hospital visits and hushed conversations. Rachel was tiny, smaller than one of my baby dolls, but covered in wires and tubes. I wasn't allowed to touch her. I wasn't even allowed to get too close. That's when I first felt it. The invisible wall forming between me and the rest of my family. When they finally brought Rachel home, our house turned into a sterilized bubble. Mom became obsessed with germs, industrial strength disinfectant, hand sanitizer in every room, and constant cleaning. To this day, the harsh smell of bleach still makes me nauseous. But here's the part that really messed me up. Whenever I showed the slightest sign of being sick, I was sent away. One sneeze, pack your bags. A mild cough, off to Grandma Mary's or Aunt Kelly's house. At first, I didn't mind. Grandma Marie made amazing cookies, and Aunt Kelly had an amazing Nancy Drew collection I was obsessed with. But kids aren't stupid. Over time, I realized the truth. I wasn't being sent away on fun little adventures. I was being treated like a threat. My entire existence was seen as a risk to my beloved sister. I tried everything to get my parents' attention in a positive way. Straight A's, Mom barely looked up from Rachel's latest doctor's appointment calendar. I won first place at the science fair with a project on renewable energy. Dad's response, "Can you store that project board in the garage? Rachel's allergic to cardboard dust." Side note, is that even a thing? But the real kicker came when I was 12. I'd been practicing for months for the school talent show, teaching myself to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. It was a big deal for me. I finally had something that was mine. But as always, Rachel came first. It was obvious where I stood in the family. Rachel had a 99 fever on the night of my big talent show. Guess who had no one in the audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, showed up for Rachel's 15-minute flute recital where she absolutely butchered hot cross buns. By the time she was 7, Rachel had figured out exactly how to play the system. She had long since outgrown any real health issues, but that didn't stop her from milking every minor inconvenience. Headache, has to stay home from school. Feeling tired? Guess who had to take over her chores? Worried about a test? Mom would actually call the school to get the deadline extended. I started spending more and more time in my room, burying myself in books about art, history, and antiques. Funny how life works out sometimes. Rachel claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener, so my room was the one place she couldn't invade. And honestly, when she pretended to be sick, a part of me was relieved. At least it meant I'd be sent to Grandma Marie's house, where someone actually asked about my day or cared about what I liked. Grandma was the one who sparked my love for vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume pieces, which she let me organize and catalog. Looking back, it feels almost prophetic. But the worst part, it wasn't just the favoritism. It was how they rewrote history just to justify it. Rachel just needs more attention because she had just a rough start. Sarah's always been so independent. Sarah understands that her sister has special needs. No, I didn't. I was just a kid who didn't know why having a good immune system somehow made me less deserving of love. Looking back, I can see how those years shaped me. The constant message that I was unsafe or inconvenient to be around. That doesn't just disappear. But hey, at least it taught me to rely on myself. When no one checks your homework or acknowledges your achievements, you quickly learn to be your biggest cheerleader. High school, most people either love it or hate it. Me, I saw it as a ticket out. While Rachel was busy building her drama empire in middle school, I was focused on laying the groundwork for my escape. And let me tell you, nothing motivates you more than knowing no one else will do it for you. Remember how I used to spend hours sorting through Grandma Marie's jewelry collection? That's where I learned a valuable lesson. The importance of organization is an attention to detail. In high school, I applied that same mindset to everything. My desk looked like something out of an organization magazine. Color-coded notes, meticulously planned study schedules, everything in its place. Rachel, of course, made fun of me for it, calling me Rain Man. But here's the thing about being invisible. No one watches your failures or your successes, so you might as well do whatever the hell you want. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was where I truly found my voice. There's something deeply satisfying about shutting down someone's argument while keeping a perfectly calm expression. It also taught me negotiation skills, something I didn't realize at the time, but would be very useful later. I won states twice, but my parents didn't come to either competition because Rachel had major soccer games. She was on the C team. She didn't even play. Junior year was when things really got interesting. I took the SAT and scored a perfect 1600. Not just really good, I mean flawless. You know how many people get that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the results screen for 20 minutes, convinced it had to be a mistake. I rushed home, excited to tell my parents, only to realize how pointless that was. Mom was in the kitchen, helping Rachel with her English homework. The conversation went something like this. "Mom, look, I got a perfect SAT score." "That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow." "Some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect." "Sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner." I still have the hard copy of that SAT SAT score somewhere. It never made it onto the fridge, but Rachel's C+ in English, that got prime refrigerator real estate, complete with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. College applications, I handled every single part of the process by myself. I applied to 15 different schools without telling anyone. I wrote all of my own essays, I gathered my own recommendation letters, and I filled out every financial form alone. Mr. Chen, my guidance counselor, was the real MVP. My parents were too busy to help with the FAFSA, so I stayed late after school filling it out myself. Then the acceptance letters started rolling in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, Duke, and each one came with a scholarship offer. I kept them locked in a box under my bed. Why? Because I knew exactly what would happen if Rachel found out. And just like clockwork, the moment my Harvard letter arrived, my parents' focus completely shifted to Rachel. But if Sarah goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone. Cue the dramatics. The day I got a full ride to University of Michigan, Rachel made JV cheerleading. Guess which one got a family celebration at Olive Garden? And it wasn't me. I had microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went out for dinner. But you know what? The scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition covered. Room and board covered. Book allowance covered. I was finally going to leave that house where I was either ignored or in the way. The day my official acceptance package letter arrived, I went to my favorite spot in the library, a 4th floor window seat overlooking the park, and I just sat there and cried. Not sad tears, tears of relief. Telling my parents was about as fun as you'd expect. At dinner, I finally told them, I'm going to the University of Michigan. Their reactions, Michigan? But that's so far. What if Rachel needs you? I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Rachel's cheerleading competitions are really expensive. Oh my god, finally! Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos. That summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save money. Carol, my boss, was a saint. She always gave me extra tips. She made sure I got to take home leftover pie at the end of my shift, and she taught me something way more valuable than any school lesson. Baby, in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say. Move-in day at the University of Michigan, my parents couldn't make it. Why? Because, surprise, Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Kelly took me instead. She helped me set up my dorm, then handed me an envelope. Your grandma Marie wanted you to have this, she said. She's so proud of you. Inside, $500. Later, I found out that grandma had been setting aside money from her social security checks for months just to support me. That night, alone in my dorm, I made a promise. I was going to build a life so incredible that being ignored would be impossible. Not out of revenge, not to prove anything to my family, but that 8-year-old girl who used to be sent away for sneezing. College was a whirlwind. All-nighters, instant ramen, freedom. I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan, but did my parents notice? Nope, they were too busy helping Rachel transfer to her 3rd college in 2 years. Then, life took an unexpected turn. I landed an entry-level job at Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. That's not the real name, but if you know the industry, you probably know it. Old money clientele, high-end estates, incredible artifacts. I started in the estate sales department, cataloging belongings of the wealthy after their passing. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills. Then came my breakthrough, the Kingston estate. Miss Kingston had passed away, leaving behind rooms filled with what everyone assumed was costume jewelry. But those hours spent organizing Grandma Marie's collection, they paid off. One piece caught my eye, a simple Art Deco brooch. Not flashy, not covered in diamonds, but something about it felt off. Too heavy to be fake, too intricate for a cheap replica. I spent my entire lunch break researching antique jewelry markings. Then I stayed late at the office, using the auction house's exclusive access to antique jewelry databases. The more I studied, the more convinced I became that this wasn't just costume jewelry, but I was the quote-unquote new girl, so no one would believe me. So I did what the debate team taught me. I built my case, spent 2 weeks studying Art Deco authentication, used my own savings to enroll in an online gemology course, compiled historical records, comparative images, and maker's marks. Then I finally worked up the courage to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison. The conversation went like this. Sir, I think we may have something significant in the Kingston collection, Harrison said. Sarah, we've already cataloged those as costume pieces. I know, but look at these maker's marks. They match Cartier's 1925 signatures exactly. Where did you learn all of this? I did some research. Long story short, that costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. Turns out, it was part of an exclusive Cartier collection from the 1920s, a treasure hidden in plain sight. And the real kicker, Harrison started to trust me. Suddenly, I wasn't just the new girl, I was the authenticator. My obsession with vintage jewelry finally had meaning. I took every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales, researching and cataloging. I built a network of collectors and experts. My apartment, it looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream. Walls covered in vintage hallmarks, authentication guides, and historical references. And the results? More rare discoveries, higher value auctions, bigger commissions. I had finally found my place, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just being overlooked, I was irreplaceable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I was saving money, building a career, and carving out a name for myself. Meanwhile, my family remained oblivious. At Sunday dinners, which I still attended like a fool, the conversations went something like this. Sarah's still working at that antique shop, right? Auction house, actually, and yes, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece. Rachel, interrupting. Oh my god, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall. I had stopped caring. For the first time, I had something that was mine, something I was incredible at, something that had nothing to do with being Rachel's sister. Then came the Rothschild collection. 2 years into my time at the auction auction house, we landed a massive estate sale from an old money family. The industry was buzzing. I was part of the team cataloging their jewelry collection, and that's when I saw it. A seemingly ordinary Art Nouveau piece that everyone else had overlooked. I couldn't let it go. I spent 3 days straight investigating it, barely sleeping, and my instincts were right. It was a lost piece from a legendary French jeweler's private collection, one that was believed to have disappeared during World War II. When it finally sold at auction for $238,000, I thought this would be my big break. Then my boss Harrison called me into his office. I thought I was getting a promotion. Instead, he said something that completely changed my life. "Sarah, you're wasting your talents here. You should be running your own authentication business." At first, I just laughed it off. Me? Start a business? With what money? But the idea took root. I started doing small authentication projects on the side. Word spread fast. Private collectors started reaching out to me directly. Then one night hit me. I was sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by jewelry manuals, authentication tools, and stacks of research notes, and I realized this was something I could actually do. I could build something for myself. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a massive loan against my car. I emptied my savings. I rented a tiny office in the worst part of town. People thought I was insane. Maybe I was, but I transformed a storage room above a Chinese restaurant into my first office. The rent was cheap. The Wi-Fi barely worked unless you sat in the corner by the window, and it always smelled like Kung Pao chicken, but it was mine. The first few months were terrifying. I would wake up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat doing mental math at how many months it would be until I went broke. Loan payments felt like a noose, in my future office, oh yeah, a card table from Goodwill, a chair I found on the curb. Don't worry, I scrubbed it clean. But in the high-end jewelry world, two things matter: reputation and connections. And my time at the auction house had given me both. I started small. I took on authentication work for local antique dealers, charging less than the major firms, but my attention to detail, it made an impact. Word spread. Then came my first big break. A dealer I had worked with at the auction house called me about a Victorian era brooch collection. The owner wanted confirmation before putting it up for sale. Turned out it was a massive collection spanning 3 generations. I worked for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping. When I finished, I documented everything, and buried within the collection, 2 extremely rare pieces that had been misidentified as replicas. The owner was thrilled. Not only did she pay me my full fee, but she also gave a 10% commission when the collection sold. And just like that, my tiny business was on the map. The first major sale changed everything. One of the pieces I authenticated sold for $86,000. That single commission was more money than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. And just like that, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Private collectors wanted my expertise. Estate lawyers sought my authentication on inherited jewelry. Even my old auction house started sending me work. I'm pretty sure Harrison was quietly spreading the word. Thanks, boss. Scaling up. By year 2, I had hired my first employee, Jenny, a freshly graduated gemologist who reminded me way too much of myself at her age. Brilliant, but constantly overlooked because she was quiet, sharp-eyed, but unsure of her place. Today, she's my head of authentication and worth her weight in gold. The business exploded. We moved into a proper downtown office. Goodbye, Kung Pao chicken smell. I built a team of specialists, and we developed a reputation for finding lost treasures. You wouldn't believe how many historically significant pieces sit in people's attics, mistaken for cheap costume jewelry, keeping it a secret from my family. The more successful I became, the harder it was to hide, but my family still thought I worked in an antique shop. Rachel, ever the condescending one, would make comments like, "Hey Sarah, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop wants it?" Meanwhile, that morning, I just authenticated a 1.2 million Fabergé item. Sure, Rachel, I'll look into it. Mom still introduced me as, "This is my other daughter, Sarah. She works with old jewelry or something." Meanwhile, I had just been quoted in Forbes. Our company had just opened our 3rd office, and no one had a clue. Keeping it a secret became a game. It was like an inside joke with myself. I'd sit down at Sunday dinner, dressed in Chanel, but they thought it was Target. Rachel would brag for 20 minutes about her $200 Michael Kors watch, and I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. No one ever noticed. Managing success. By year 5, my company had offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more time on airplanes than in my own bed. Our reputation, amazing. It turns out many wealthy people want their jewelry authenticated without the world knowing. The money was insane. I had to hire financial advisors just to manage it all. I bought a beautiful home, nothing too flashy. I drove a high-end but discreet car. But my real splurge, my home office. State-of-the-art authentication equipment. A vault so secure it would make Fort Knox jealous. The best security money could buy. The irony, my family thought I was struggling. Sarah's so sweet, helping us out. She must be living on a ramen just to manage. Meanwhile, I had just authenticated a collection that earned me a commission bigger than their mortgage. You know what's funny about success? The more you have, the harder it is to explain to people who always saw you as inferior. It's like explaining color to someone who has only ever seen black and white. They don't have the context to understand. By this point, our company was the Midwest's leading high-end jewelry authentication firm, living a double life. Our authentication business dominated the industry. Our reputation was flawless, pun intended. But every Sunday, I still played the role of Sarah, the humble antique shop worker at my parents' house. Mornings consisted of conference calls with Dubai collectors, afternoons consisted of authenticating million-dollar jewelry, and the evenings consisted of eating my my mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel dawned in on her biggest career wins, like bringing her boss coffee without spilling it. The moment I'll never forget. That Sunday, I had just closed a deal on a Cartier piece that had been missing for 40 years. Commission 7 figures. I drove straight from the deal to my parents' house, still buzzing from the success. Then, mid-dinner, my mom squinted at my outfit. "Sarah, sweetie, are you struggling? Your clothes look a little worn." I was sitting there in a $3,000 cashmere sweater I'd purposely chosen for its low-key appearance. Before I could reply, Rachel jumped in. "Well, maybe if you got a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." Dad, trying to smooth things over. "Rachel, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I almost choked on my pot roast. The anonymous transfers. Around this time, Aunt Kelly mentioned that my parents were struggling to cover Rachel's student loans and medical bills. Then, Mom casually dropped a bomb. "We might have to sell the house." I couldn't let that happen. For all their favoritism and dismissiveness, it was still my childhood home. So without telling them, I set up an anonymous monthly transfer, $5,000 straight into their account. When Mom asked where the money came from, I lied. "I'm just cutting back, living on rice and beans." They assumed Aunt Kelly or some other family member was helping. Rachel, of course, she claimed credit for inspiring all this family generosity, watching Rachel spend my money. The money helped, but it had unexpected consequences. My parents pitied me, treating me like some self-sacrificing saint scraping by to support the family. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending skyrocketed. She bragged about her outlet finds, but I knew real Gucci at 20 paces. Luxury bags, weekend trips, Instagram flexing about her blessed life. I'm almost certain she was using my support money for shopping sprees, but I kept quiet because honestly, the irony was too perfect. The MBA drama. Rachel announced that she wanted to go back to school for her master's and bachelor's. Of course, only a private university would do. Mom called me in tears. "We just can't afford it, honey." I suggested maybe Rachel should consider a state school. They have great programs. Mom gasped. "Oh, sweetie, you don't understand. Your sister has to maintain a certain image. But speaking of helping, can we increase your monthly contribution for a few years?" I upped it to $7,000 per month. It barely affected my accounts, but seeing them praise Rachel for being so ambitious while believing I was eating ramen to fund it, that stung a little. The ultimate twist. Rachel wanted to attend an elite business school. She had no idea that I had just been invited to give a guest lecture there. The dean himself asked me to speak about luxury goods authentication and business growth. While my family begged me for money, I was being recognized as an industry expert. I had to make up an excuse for missing Sunday dinner that week, because how do you explain that you're teaching a class at the same school your teacher is desperate to attend? At this point, my career felt like a secret identity. By day, I ran a multi-million-dollar authentication empire, but by Sunday nights, I was still Sarah, the overlooked daughter working at an antique shop. The breaking point was Thanksgiving. The weight of all the lies was getting heavier. Rachel constantly mocked my career. Mom apologized to her friends for my modest lifestyle, and Dad suggested again that I should get a real job. I think deep down, I always knew things would blow up eventually. I just didn't expect it to implode so spectacularly. Mom's Thanksgiving breakdown. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Mom called me in tears. She had been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the idea of cooking for 20 guests was overwhelming. Now, I'd love to say I offered to cook purely out of goodwill, but honestly, I was tired of pretending her dry-out turkey was edible. The Thanksgiving takeover. I offered, "Why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered." Mom immediately protested. "Oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer." I reassured her, "Don't worry about the cost. I've been saving up." She paused suspiciously. "You're not taking out a loan, are you?" What she didn't know was that I had connections with a top-tier catering firm, the kind that handles corporate galas and celebrity events. I booked them without hesitation. The cost? More than what my parents thought I made in 2 months. But whatever. Thanksgiving morning felt different. I had my laptop with me. I needed to monitor a major online auction in Hong Kong. A rare Art Nouveau necklace was up for bidding, and I had a client who needed it authenticated if they won. The food arrived on time, perfectly plated and utterly flawless. And then, of course, Rachel had to open her mouth. "Store-bought stuffing? Really, Sarah? Mom's is so much better." From the same girl who once set off a smoke alarm while making toast. Meanwhile, Mom was apologizing to the guests for not cooking herself. But let's be honest, everyone was devouring the meal. Rachel finally shut up after trying the maple glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than her weekly grocery bill. After dinner, while dessert was being served, I stepped away to check my laptop. The auction was getting intense, and I needed to be ready to authenticate the necklace if my client placed the winning bid. I set up in my old bedroom. Yes, the same bedroom that hadn't changed since high school, while Rachel's room had undergone 3 expensive renovations. That's when it all went wrong. I left my authentication software running, with multiple tabs displaying active accounts, pending contracts, recent high-value transactions. Rachel, being Rachel, barged in without knocking. Some things never change. She came in borrowing my phone charger, but then her eyes landed on my laptop screen, and then she saw something she wasn't supposed to. Her smirk widened. "Let's show everyone what Sarah's really been up to." Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and walked straight into the dining room. Picture this: 20 guests, aunts, uncles, cousins, bellies full of gourmet turkey, half drunk on what they thought was cheap Trader Joe's wine. Rachel, smug as ever, flipped my laptop around, triumphantly exposing my screen. She expected to reveal some embarrassing antique transactions. Instead, silence. You could hear the clock ticking. The screen displayed the following: current account balance $12.4 million, pending authentication contract $485,000, recent transaction $1.2 million, Hong Kong auctions house quarterly profit $4.2 million. Rachel's face cycled through 5 emotions in 3 seconds. The final expression, somewhere between shock and absolute nausea. She actually wobbled on her feet. She whispered, voice shaking, this can't be real. Mom, confused. Rachel, honey, what is it? Rachel, barely able to speak, said, she's rich. Sarah is rich. Chaos ensues. If the silence before was bad, this was something else entirely. Then Mom started giggling. Not just a small chuckle, a full-blown belly laugh. Oh, don't be silly. Sarah works at that little antique shop. I took a deep breath, stood up, and smoothed out my cashmere sweating, the one that cost more than their monthly mortgage. I smiled and simply said, actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. I let that sink in before adding, for years, while you've been making fun of my antique shop job, I've been authenticating million-dollar pieces. That little business you never cared to ask about, it has offices in 3 cities, Detroit, Chicago, Miami. Dad choked on his drink. Aunt Kelly dropped her fork. Uncle started coughing uncontrollably. But Rachel, she looked like she was about to pass out. Mom's laughter shifted into something else entirely. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood up so fast that her chair slammed onto the floor. Mom screamed, you have millions and you let us struggle? I stayed calm. Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month while sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans. And there it was. Not congratulations, not we're proud of you, just anger that I hadn't given them more. Rachel, of course, burst into tears. I deserve to know. You betrayed the family. Then Dad jumped in. How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you. I snapped. Years of being ignored. Years of being the family disappointment. Years of every achievement being dismissed. It all came pouring out. Raised me? You sent me to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every award, every milestone because Rachel might feel left out. You didn't save a single penny for my college, but took out loans for her private school. And now you're mad that I built something for myself? For the next 5 minutes, pure chaos. Mom screamed about family obligations. Dad shouted about ungrateful children. And Rachel flipped between sobbing and demanding to know exactly how much I had. Meanwhile, the high-end catering staff awkwardly tried to serve dessert like they weren't witnessing a full-blown meltdown. I calmly grabbed my laptop, picked up my Hermès bag, the one Mom previously praised as a nice replica, and walked out. As I reached my limited edition BMW, I heard Mom already making plans to spend my money. We can finally upgrade Rachel's car and put a down payment on that house in a better neighborhood. My mom was furious. My phone started vibrating non-stop. The family group chat exploded. Rachel, of course, immediately ran to Facebook. Her post, imagine finding out your own sister is a millionaire while your family struggles. A betrayal. Comment section, pure chaos. Distant cousins suddenly had very strong opinions on my morals. Former high school classmates who I hadn't spoken to in years chimed in. Even my third cousin's wife's sister had thoughts on family obligations. But this was the best part. Rachel actually wrote, all those years I helped Sarah with her career, giving her advice on how to move up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly rich. The betrayal. Help me? Her only career advice was you should try selling jewelry on Etsy. I almost threw my phone across the room. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members, you know what happens next. They send other people to guilt trip you on their behalf. Aunt Susan, who I see once every 3 years. Family is everything, sweetie. Uncle Bob, who still thinks I'm 12. Sharing wealth is an important virtue. Somehow, even my third cousin's sister's wife got my number and felt the need to lecture me. But nothing topped what happened next. They showed up at my office. I arrived at work Monday morning, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Rachel, sitting in my company's reception area. Rachel clutching her Michael Kors bag like it was actually worth something. My receptionist, Jenny, looked deeply uncomfortable. They said they have an appointment for authentication services? Right, sure. I walked over. Mom stood up. We've talked it over as a family. I raised an eyebrow. A family discussion without the family member you're discussing? Mom ignored me. And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Rachel nodded enthusiastically. And that's when I really lost it. Dad leaned forward, completely serious. I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly. Mom nodded. And your father and I would like to retire. We're thinking beach house in Florida. I just stared. Did you miss the whole part where I've been sending you $7,000 a month? That's $80,000 a year for free. That's nothing compared to what you have done. You owe us. I scoffed. I owe you? For what exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons? Mom waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything. I shook my head. No, I gave myself everything. And you know what? I pulled out my phone. And right there, in the middle of my own office lobby, I canceled their monthly transfers. Mom gasped like I just slapped her. Rachel launched into her usual fake crying performance, but stopped the moment she realized it wasn't working. Then things got ugly. They refused to leave. I had to call security on my family. Seeing my 60-year-old mother being dragged out while screaming about ungrateful children, that was a sight I'll never forget. Jenny, my receptionist, turned to me asking, do I want to press charges? I sighed. No, but I did make sure to have their names added to the building's do not admit list. For the next few weeks, the harassment was relentless. New phone numbers, fake email accounts, even messages sent through my company's customer service line. It got to the point where I had to send them a formal legal notice threatening harassment charges. Then Mom played her final card. She called Grandma Marie. But here's the thing, Grandma is wiser than all of them combined. Her response, good for Sarah. About time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. Mom didn't speak to Grandma Marie for 2 months after that. Update, 6 months later. It's been half a year since that Thanksgiving disaster. I moved into a new home with top tier security. I changed all of my numbers and the company thriving. Ironically, my family drama has actually attracted several high profile clients who respect my strict boundaries. And Rachel is still making passive aggressive posts about toxic wealth and family betrayal. According to what I've heard, she's trying to make her own jewelry authentication business. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad, they finally stopped trying to contact me after my lawyer sent an official letter outlining how harassment charges would impact their lives. Now they're telling everyone that they never wanted my money anyway and that they're just praying for my salvation. The best part, for the first time in my life, I feel free. No more Sunday dinners full of insults disguised as jokes. No more downplaying my success to make them comfortable. No more financing the Rachel show. And my therapist says I'm finally setting healthy boundaries. I say I'm finally living authentically. Final thoughts. To Reddit, thanks for letting me share my story. Special thanks to the catering company who actually sent me a Christmas card saying Thanksgiving was the highlight of their year. And one last thing. Rachel, I know you're reading this. That Cartier bracelet you flexed on Instagram, definitely fake, just saying. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to Reddit Family